Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay. Such a nice start to the event because we are discussing about the fintech and BFSI and how cybersecurity is done here. Now, I think there's nothing better than having such esteemed guests here on the stage. Well, I think very fundamentally, if we look at it, cybersecurity in BFSI and fintech has been growing at a very exponential level because we in India are at the forefront of financial services booming at a very faster pace, right? With the kind of volume that we are all dealing with, right? Just to give a quick example, the total number of users for PhonePe is that of the entire population of America, right? So you can believe how big of a challenge that we are also going to be facing with such kind of volume that we are playing with today. Fintech services today are coming up with groundbreaking services, specifically around the way we spend, the way we save our money, way we invest, and way we ensure that we insure our aspects as well, right? So with that, I want to start the panel discussion today with all the guests here. I know we are facing quite a lot of challenges when it comes to cybersecurity, right? With the volume that we are playing at. And very recently, I was speaking to one of my friends from Shrestha IT. They do the threat intelligence for the state of Karnataka. And he gave me a couple of numbers which really surprised me, right? So to start off with, in terms of cyber threats, in the last 75 days, we've had 1.5 lakh people who have been victim to phishing attacks. And we have had 8.7 lakh systems that have been infected by malwares. This has happened in the last 75 days alone, right? This even includes the ransomware attacks that have happened quite recently, where one of the very old traditional fintech houses, a wealth management house that was infected by a lockbit malware, where most of their operations had to come down to a standstill. So likewise, if you see, 13 lakh people have been victims towards cryptojacking. There's also 6.4 lakhs of botnets that have been active in the last 75 days alone. Well, this seems like a very scary situation for the fintech world, right? So I would really want to start the discussion, with how banking is able to tackle such kind of scenarios, and I'll then come down to the way fintechs are working towards them. So to start off with, Ratan, what is your take on this? How would you look at these kind of numbers specifically?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what he said. So if you read the RBI Financial Stability Report, which the RBI governor has just released, and they talk about the two type of attacks that is seen and that is very challenging for the banking industry. And the first one is ransomware, and the second one is the AIM and ML based attack. And it looks like that attackers are using AIML more than we, the industry people. So about us, we are a bank, Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, and although we are a mass market bank, but our prime customer segment is the urban poors, and we cater to the banking needs of unserved and underserved. So for them, the small amount of money is a very big money. And money or the data we can use. If a data is lost, money is lost. And why ransomware and AIML based attacks are prevalent in banking is because today, for a bank to serve the customer, they need to choose new avenues, and only the digital transformation or digital innovation is the only way to serve the customer. And for digital innovation and digital transformation, you need to open up the channels. And we as a bank, we have realized that we alone cannot serve the customer, so we need to take help of startups, fintechs. So we tie up with them. And how we can tie up with them? By way of microservices, by way of API. So there is a huge amount of data that goes in and out. between the bank and the partners. So Mr. Narendranath in the morning, he was talking about the trusted partner and the trusted system. But in practicality, you cannot trust anything, so there is a need of zero trust. So as a bank, to quickly summarize how we tackle, banks are almost in the banking, in the financial pyramid, they are the most mature organization in terms of cyber security. Why so? So because largely thanks to the regulator, we have been heavily regulated for years now. So the systems are very, very mature and very, very stable now. But maintaining maturity is very difficult task. Reaching to maturity is easy task. So for cyber security, right from the governance to the end user and to the customer, the entire supply chain needs to be strengthened. And as I said that we have a very strong regulation at our end. We need to comply. There is a huge penalty for us. But as a bank CISO, I believe that it is not we should not work only for the compliance. We should look for the best practices, and the compliance would be the byproduct. So that is what I wanted to start the discussion with.
Thanks a lot, Ratan. Specifically on the aspect that you mentioned on the supply chain, because the supply chain attacks are also something that's been very prevalent in the last couple of years. So likewise, is it the same situation with the large commercial banks as well? Santosh, what is your take on that?
So yeah, firstly, whatever I say, it's because I represent a very large global organization, so I want to keep my views as personal here. That will allow me to dwell deeper and share more thoughts inside this and insights here, right? So firstly, whether it's the same challenge, it's much more, I would say, as a large global bank, you are regulated across multiple geographies. So which means that you're not just looking at Indian regulator, you also have to ensure that you are within the guidelines of other regulators across different geographies, and each of them can have different convergence points, right? So that's one. So which means that our security systems have to be adherent not just to the Indian guidelines but global guidelines, and also the attack that we face is much more global in that sense, right? So that's one aspect as a global bank, I would say. The second I want to also bring to your notice that every time I see a challenge, right, as an innovation head, I see it as an opportunity. And I want all young folks here, all startups here to also look at this as an opportunity, because what I'm going to tell you is very interesting. Probably in the modern India, this is the first time India has a product that is second to none. We are actually leading the world in terms of our DPI, digital public infrastructure. Our UPI is going to go getting global now, which also means that we are not just exporting the financial transaction layer, we'll also be exporting the financial transaction security layer, right? So which is a large opportunity, I would say, right? And we're just at the cusp of growth, which means that there's tremendous amount of progress that we can make. Like the gentleman earlier was mentioning about how BSNL is building indigenous solutioning for their 4G. The same case, right, on the financial security layer also, I think we are required to build it, because there's no global precedents built on this layer. Right? I mean, there's no UPI in the world, so we are the first ones to build, which also means that there's no security layer that's being built out by any of the global players. So that's a large opportunity. That's how I would see, right? Now coming to the challenge of whether, maybe let's split the CyberSecK into two parts. Right? One is at the org level. An org gets attacked at multiple points in time for different aspects. It could be in terms of trying to harvest the data. It could be in terms of hijack some of the systems there, right? So the spamming and the phishing that happens. Now the other part is the consumer side of it, right? How the end user gets affected. Now with the end user side, India is facing the challenge. I think the administration, the government authorities are putting their best foot forward, but it also means that these attacks will not stop, right? It's like a race, right? Every time we plug a loophole, they find another loophole, right? Every time we change something, they are changed, right? Now SMS OTPs are being also fished across now, right? With what we saw in the loan app scams, right? The SMSs were being harvested as well. So every loophole has to be plugged, and as a CyberSecK org, the org has to think two steps ahead of the cybercrime professional. I would say professional because the scale that they are operating, right from Jamtara to the cyber attack that you're seeing, they are really at professional level, right? And that creates a new opportunity for cybersec professionals in India to build out those moats, defensive moats for the banks as well as the fintechs, right? Fintechs are of different hues and cries. I would say they come in different shapes and forms. Not everybody is looking at cybersec as their first challenge because they're looking at building business and innovating. So that's where a specialist organization who can create those microservices, enable those security modes for them, are of highly regarded and highly required at this point in time. Right? While the banks will have another challenge in onboarding these cybersec requirements because of the regulatory, because of the BAU, the nature of the beast that we are running today, which is a very large organization. Any changes have to be integrated at multiple levels, have to be reviewed at multiple levels. It's a challenge on its own, but I see this as a much larger opportunity for the startups today. I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So I think thanks for putting it out in a very concise and very structured way for that. I think when we look at hacking or these kind of attacks that are happening in the financial side of the world, specifically, we have seen attackers targeting majorly the banks, the large banks, or because the way supply chain is even maintained in most of the banks is very old school and traditional approach. So, as the world says it, they'll not be able to catch up with the hackers, right? But on the other side, now we have quite a lot of organizations that are working on different aspects of the financial areas, like which are fintechs, right? Now, from the fintech perspective, of course, what no one is talking about is even you guys get attacked on a very regular basis, day in and day out, right? It could be malwares, ransomwares, or people sending in documents or PDFs which have these malwares attached with them. Now, how are you guys handling that? Specifically, I know it's a very vague question to ask, but of course, if you can just help us in a very concise and structured approach as to how you are doing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So basically, taking back the whole, I think whatever Ratan said, see, fintechs predominantly embrace cloud.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I think fintechs are all digital natives and they are born in cloud, most of the fintechs. So the two challenges is, while large banks' infrastructure is mostly on-prem or like they're very large, they can afford a lot of capex. Unlike fintechs, which typically embrace cloud, predominantly public cloud, and I'm sure the moment you embrace public cloud, typically it's always on the internet. And while there's a lot of innovation happens in the fintech space, if you look at, you referred back to PhonePe, if you look at all these digital native apps, whether it's PhonePe or any of the digital apps, they're constantly being built. If you look at, these are all very highly feature-rich applications. So there's a continuous development happening, I'm sure, and you've seen every time you open a Paytm or a PhonePe or any of the app, you see suddenly certain features, right? Overnight, suddenly something coming. So the point is, so it's like a factory setting, right? Continuously, the fintechs are innovating, developing applications and testing, publishing on the internet, making it available to the consumers. So I think the point what I'm trying to make is speed is one of the primary objective. If you look at very agile, I think a lot of innovation happens in the fintech space. So why I touch this point, because in this whole speed, sometimes you may miss putting controls or verifying those controls, because there's a lot of pressure on the fintechs to deliver, faster, especially the way and because while there's a nice saying, right? Elephants can't dance. The large banks, of course, the big banks will run in their own process-driven way. The fintechs are very, in fact, restless in building things, features, delivering faster. That's great. That's how innovation happens. But equally, balancing, I think, the features versus security is always a challenge.
Yeah.
That's where the whole premise of this, attackers, they know, and attackers, cyber criminals are not criminals, but they're also developers. But as he said, they are much more, in fact, knowledgeable than the guys sitting the other side. So they exactly understand in this whole speed where can be the vulnerability or where they can really exploit. That's fundamentally how the ransomware attacks and the DDoS attacks and all these current attacks are happening. So it's a constant struggle, as I think he said and Ratan said, it's a constant struggle. And my point of view is, while compliance is very important, it sets the message and drives the whole information security story, compliance is not security. Compliance predominantly is looked as a tick in the box. It's important. But probably securing those infrastructure, especially cloud, the whole layers of security, putting controls, looking at the risks and constantly struggling to see how we can as I said, we are ahead of the game, and now thanks to now a lot of AI ML adoption, and it's a completely different game altogether. But again, having said that, I think continuously protecting the customer data, providing the digital trust to the customers is primary key. That's what the CISOs, we have a great responsibility, and it's interesting also.
Sure, thank you. Hilal, over to you. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's the same as Satish, right? So one of the things that I sort of want to emphasize on is that the data that you quoted about the attacks and the statistics that you mentioned, those are basically like the figures that get reported, right? So, and which probably come in the news or basically gets sort of like distributed. But I think it's much more than that, right? So there's a lot of data that actually does not get reported, is either because people are not able to detect them, or there is a basically a process in place where they are still evaluating the impact of those particular attacks. So I believe that the data is quite skewed in favor of the basic attackers. On the defense side, of course, like each fintech or each bank, right? So there are a lot of services that they offer that did not exist before. So each service actually keeps on evolving. There's a pattern of basically like enhancing the services that you offer. Simple example, right? So for example, we are actually like leaders in the UPI transactions, right? But then we said, okay, it's not enough. There are people who are going to be like basically like bogged down by the lack of the infrastructure, right? So we introduced UPI Lite. We introduced pay laters. We introduced basically offline payments, right? So meaning that there's always like an innovation that keeps on happening with respect to fintech products. So when you have that kind of innovation that happens, it's inevitable that there will be some unknowns over there. No, I mean, all of the products that we launch or all the products that get introduced, they go through a thorough, basically audit in terms of the security weaknesses. They get assessed, they get certified, they get validated, they get accredited, right? So with different parties and everybody actually like thinks about it. So it does not get launched just like that, right? So, but at the end of the day, there are still going to be unknowns because that service did not exist before.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution of basically like the technology, and with this, with the evolution of technology, the evolution of threats also becomes inevitable. So regardless of like basically how much we want to basically like emphasize on the security before the product is actually introduced, this obviously the lot of effort is in terms of basically detecting and mitigating the risks that will be actually found with the instruments that we actually offer. That's why there is an emphasis, I mean, there's an importance given to basically continuous monitoring. We have to give basically continuous auditing. It has to be, there has to be continuous security, right? So without that, all the products that we actually introduce may not actually be like, may not necessarily be resistant or resilient towards cyber attacks. So ransomwares and things like that, you may actually say that, okay, there are going to be some controls that you can put in place, but there are going to be some unknown attacks that you may not have a defense for. So that's why it's very important that the process and the products are built in such a way that there's defense in depth. There is basically, it's resilient towards all, I mean, all sorts of known vulnerabilities, right? So in terms of making sure that there is a lot of money movement in the fintech business in the banks, right? So, and wherever there is basically money involved, there are always going to be threats with respect to basically money laundering, fraud and abuse, and all of those things. So what are the necessary like technical controls that you can place? Very limited. You have, your choice is very limited. So that's why it's important basically that you have a good audit process in place. You make sure that you have like makers and checkers. People are basically like accountable. There's good basically like monitoring in place. And if, for example, there is any sort of like incident, you need to have a very robust infrastructure in place to make sure that you can actually reconcile those things. So innovation is never going to stop in fintechs or in banks, right? So it's a continuous process, right? So it means that, okay, like if we have innovation in security, there's always going to be innovation in threats as well. Ratan was talking about AI. So this is something that obviously is going to come along, right? So it's tomorrow it may be something different, right? So we have to build products that are actually going to be resilient towards that. Yeah, so I believe that all the fintechs and any kind of basically like a financial institution, they need to have those principles in place where they can build products that may not only be resistant towards what we know today, but also what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, that's a nice take, Hilal. So, I think alongside with fintech, uh, the pace at which artificial intelligence today is booming is insane. I think we did not even comprehend in the last couple of months the pace at which it has grown today, right? Uh, I think just to give a quick example, one of the very important things that every fintech organization would really look at is the eKYC method, right? Now we are seeing quite a lot of videos on the internet that basically where people are able to even bypass those mechanisms using artificial intelligence. So, such as that, do you also see any other aspect that would, of artificial intelligence specifically, would pose a major threat to the fintech world or the banking as well?
Absolutely, right? So think about it, right? So earlier, the bar of entry for malicious actors was very high.
Yeah.
The tooling was not there for them. They had to like literally learn the system. They had to learn the craft in order to be successful in actually like executing an attack. Now, with artificial intelligence and with the basically automations in place, now that bar has been reduced. Now, you do not necessarily need to basically do a lot of research into basically exploit development, for example, or vulnerability research. So I'll give one practical example. So earlier, like a few years back, when I had to kind of like do an exploit research, right? So I used to basically debug code manually, right? So I had to basically like go line by line, step by step, function by function, to understand where is actually potential vulnerability in the code, right? It used to take days. I used to open a debugger, take snapshots on a regular basis, and basically compare the results. And it used to be a tedious, basically like exercise.
Yeah.
And it used to take days together for me to basically build a successful exploit. But what now has happened is that there are basically AI which are not used for the good, but they're like kiosk APIs, they're like chaotic, like Gen AI, and things like the tools that are readily available for you. Right? So what all you have to do is basically upload the code and ask it, well, what is the entry point for my exploit? And actually, like some of these like Hexploit and things like that, what they do is actually they will not only give you the information about the vulnerability in the code, but they will also give you a working exploit. So most of those working exploits, you do not need any interaction with the end system. You can remotely execute those attacks. That's why the ransomware happens. That's why the other things happen. So the bar of entry has been reduced. It has been lowered to such a level that it does not require you to be very sophisticated. So earlier we took a lot of comfort knowing that, oh, people will not figure out the complexity in the code. Right now that's actually taken out the window, right? The obfuscation used to work a lot, right? So the obfuscation of no use anymore, right? So all of those things when you consider, so it has become like an open field now. So people can actually like become experts at exploiting things, exploiting products without actually knowing what exactly they're interacting with. So given that we are actually in that particular context, so it's very important to understand that the AI will bring a lot of challenges. And that's why people like Satish, people like Ratan, and we have been actually like talking about it a lot, right, lately. And I think not a single basically discussion goes where we actually don't discuss these things because it's so crucial.
Yeah. So
I want to add to that.
Yeah, Santosh.
So there, let's break it down into timelines, right? So in the short term, what you're talking about is deepfakes overriding the eKYC and also hacking, using your biometrics. You could hack into your any of the banking apps, right?
Yeah.
And you could try and get some money out of somebody else's account. But also in the medium to long term, what challenge we are facing as a financial sector is much more multifold, a Y2K kind of a scenario where I was just talking to someone just earlier about this is look at how quantum, right? We see probably it's a 4 to 6 year kind of a time horizon. I see quantum being really operational. Once quantum computing becomes really operational and accessible to a larger set of people, your cryptography will be at stake, right? Now, all my passwords can be brute force hacked in under a few seconds, right? None of the passwords are safe anymore. So most banks today, most financial institutions are already building and testing these out, right? Experimenting these out to see how do I build something that is crypto or quantum safe? How do I ensure my passwords are quantum safe, not just today's time? I mean, today we're talking about ensuring that the brute force takes probably a few months or years to hack my passwords. I'm feeling safe, right? With alphanumeric and lengthwise, but those are not going to be safe. My biometrics are going to be challenged, And India has a much larger thing to worry about, having about 1.3 billion people on Aadhaar, which means that you need to safeguard this, right? And UIDAI is also working on their own quantum safe security measures there. So these are something that will also be, as we tread along, there's short-term challenges you see, but also there's medium to long-term challenges that we need to gear up for the world. I think that's what I want to sort of bring highlight it out here.
Yeah, Ratan, you wanted to add something?
I will add to this. So deep fake is a challenge, and that is a right example. We have no immediate solution for that. But when I say that AI and ML, deep fake using AI ML is a challenge, there is an opportunity too. And bank like us, so any bank in India today, because as I said, we are highly regulated, we will have 50 plus different unique security solution, not just firewall. Firewall is just one solution. Like firewall, we have 50 different solution. For each problem, we have a solution. So AI is an opportunity also. So many banks today, what they do, they do threat hunting, and they analyze signals that goes to these 50 solution and their cyber defense center. Even then, they are not able to detect. So they have written various models, AI and ML models. And my bank and few other banks also, I know that for last 5 years they have been using AI and ML to detect threats that was not detected by any of these solutions. So if AI is a problem, AI is a solution too for banks and also for fintechs.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
same thing. I think AI is both sides. AI, I think when we talk about the issues, challenges of AI, I think AI will also solve most of
Most
these
of the
problems,
problems.
because large data, especially the whole LLMs are especially taking all this large data. I think today there's a lot of buzz around AI because of this whole Gen AI and ChatGPT. Right? It's not that AI has been new; it has been there. Predominantly, most of the, as I said, cyber defense centers, the SOCs, right, the SIMs have been embracing AI for a while. In fact, traditionally those rule-based SIMs which had alert fatigues today are all replaced with a lot of models, especially AI models.
Yeah.
And of course, all the large hyperscalers use a lot of AI to, in fact, detect those at a very early stage. I think AI, as I said, AI is a threat, can also be a big opportunity which organizations will embrace, use to detect these cyber threats.
Okay. And I think, do you also feel? Of course, I know the compliance is one of the major aspects whenever it comes to fintechs or the banks, right? Of course, it is most of it, or the organizations would treat it like a pain, but still, it is something we have to do it regardless of what it is. Because with the recent news that we have been seeing, I think Paytm's the payments bank, I think it's come under quite a lot of scrutiny because of these. What is your take on the way compliance is looked at in the organizations today? And do you see that the new regulations that are coming up, are they at par with the kind of threats that we are facing in the industry as well? Or is it something that needs to be worked on as well?
Yeah, compliance is mandatory, and we have to abide by the law of the land and law of the regulator. So there is no doubt about that. But as I said that if we work only for the compliance, probably we are not at par. So we should follow the best practices. We should do our own risk assessment. We should see what is our strength and what is our weakness. And when I know that which process, which assets is more important, I should put more control over that. So control should be appropriately put. To answer your question, yes, at least in the banking sector, a regulator is very mature. They are very, very forward looking, and they take into consideration of the threats that is evolving in India and also globally. But in banking, other very important, a lot of collaboration is there in the banking world. So in India, we have a forum that is under IDRBT. If any bank, we get any signal of any attack, it is circulated among all banks.
Okay.
And that is one of the reasons that reason for the resilience of the banking system in India. And I think the collaboration is very, very important. And more than the compliance, it is the culture that is important. If an organization will not adopt the cyber first culture, probably they will not survive, because no bank today can say, or no organization today can say that they will not be attacked, they will not be breached. If they breached, what is the next? So resilience and culture, these things matter, and these things only will make any organization secure.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Just
Santosh.
extending the argument of what Ratan was mentioning, there are the interesting bit is today banks in India cannot survive without collaborating with fintechs, and vice versa. Fintechs cannot thrive without having a banking partner. So what it means is the more partnerships you build, the more failure points that can occur, right, in the whole ecosystem. And it also becomes the responsibility of the banker here or the banking entity to sort of handhold the fintechs to help them understand the compliance. Because compliance also is not is not easy to understand. Sometimes it's more of interpretation, right? That's a bigger challenge because the emerging fintechs, the new entrants in the market will find it really hard to understand how to read this compliance guideline and what action has to be taken, right? I mean, to know that have I really complied with the regulatory requirements or not is also a big question mark at many of the fintechs, right? While fintechs need to have that free will to innovate, but also I think the banks who partner with them will have an additional responsibility, not just to secure their systems, but also to secure their partner systems, to also sort of handhold and guide them to ensure that the whole ecosystem is getting upgraded. It's not just me securing myself, but my vulnerability is also coming from my partners and alliances that I have, right? It could be, like you said, other banking partners or other fintech partners, other API players that I might be having, other facilitation entities that I might be having. So each of these could be a failure point. So it augurs well for the whole ecosystem that you join hands and figure out the way forward jointly. I think that's the key I wanted to share with you all.
Basically, that also builds trust within the partners ecosystem. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, Satish.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as Ratan said, the compliance is not choice; it's mandatory.
It's
and,
mandatory. Yes.
Very important. In fact, that's the starting point, or I should say, it sets the whole context and the culture also, right? Because a lot of fintech, NBFC banks, it's an ecosystem, right? It's ecosystem, and compliance-driven culture definitely helps. Basically, to traditionally what we used to call risk-aware culture. Again, because compliance frameworks also are risk-based, and as he said, the regulators are very forward-looking, and the frameworks are quite matured now. In
Okay.
fact, the ecosystem is mature,
Yeah.
and it's a partnership overall. There's a lot of good collaboration happening, and definitely compliance helps to, in fact, put those controls based on the risk.
Got it. Yeah. Yes, Hilal.
Just to basically, like while we are on the topic of compliance, right? So I think it was already mentioned that compliance is an opportunity, right? So it's not necessarily something that's going to be like a blocker for your business, right? And I believe that I've seen a lot of innovation because of the compliance and the regulatory requirements. Companies innovate, and companies actually like make sure that okay, everything that they build actually is done to the right specifications and the right controls are actually like within control. This all happens because there's a requirement and that's mapped to a particular control. And that leads to a lot of innovation because right now there, for example, the Data Protection Act, right? So there is, I mean, it was not even discussed like a couple of years back, right? So now people are thinking about consent management. They are thinking about privacy by design, right? They're thinking about security by design, right?
Yeah.
All of those things actually do not happen because like we all of a sudden got this inclination to basically do good for the people, right?
Yeah.
So it's all happens because there's a requirement for that. Like we have sort of like ignored certain aspects of compliance, which actually comes forward. It becomes like a mandatory thing for us to do. And this leads to a lot of collaboration, as the panelists were actually just mentioning. And I believe that in fintech and in banking, in financial institutions, your security is only as good as your partners. If your partner is actually not at a scale or at basically the benchmark that you have set for security, so it's, your security is not going to have no value because your supply chain will be weak and you will be always basically vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I do believe that all the requirements with respect to basically compliance is a big opportunity, and we wholeheartedly welcome all the regulations that come in because it allows us to build products that are going to stand the test of the time.
Got it. Yeah, Santosh.
Actually, just a couple of points to add there. What's also interesting in Indian context is there are various councils or the industry bodies that are come together. You can think of the Fintech Convergence Council, or you have the DLAI, you have the CII, FICCI. They're also bringing a lot of effort to educate fintechs, and these bodies also lobby with the regulator or make representations, build thought leadership, build white papers, and circulate amongst the internal groups that helps really bring in that knowledge in terms of the compliance requirement and interpretation skills of those compliance guidelines.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So being mindful of the time, I'll just open up the floor for the questions from the audience as well. So we have mics being run around here. Yes, the gentleman in white. Can we pass on the mic to him, please? Yes, sir. Please tell your name and your question in 1 or 2 lines.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
My name is Hanuman Kulkarni. I am from Maestro Vision Consulting. I have a couple of questions. I don't know how much time I will get here. So, Ratan, I liked your term. If data is lost, money is lost. Just to add, there's an old wise saying, if character is lost, everything is lost. Now, if data is lost, everything is lost. Okay, my question to you, to all the panelists is, so while we concentrate, I mean, as a CISO, we concentrate in actually adopting the security and cyber related checks in database layer, application layer, or business layer. But now that time has changed. So we have to look at ISO model, ISO is a model starting from physical layer up to presentation layer. So what innovation is happening in this space? I mean, across the layers, starting from cable up to presentation layer, up to UI. And just to add to this one, there are instances in the recent past where people have lost the money through their mobile charger and CCTV. So no CISO or no fintech SMEs would have actually predicted this proactively. Such a thing can happen. So what is your take on this one? My next question is.
So I think we'll
so
take
more
one
than
so we'll take one question per person.
In addition to fintech, so a lot of channels like mobile, ATM, and any other POS, point of sales. So how you are actually bringing the cyber security practices so that we can actually prevent some of the cyber attacks?
So I will answer your second question first. So in banks, we have a enterprise-wide EFRM system. So they monitor the cross-channel transactions, and where a lot of AI and ML engine are built along with the traditional rules, and they will detect any anomaly and will ask for the step-up authentication and things like that. Different banks are at different maturity, but this will certainly help the customer in dealing with the money that they are going to lose. First part about the fintech, my colleagues over here, they will answer. But in banks, what we do, we are adopting a zero trust model. So we are not trusting anything, be it at network layer or be it at application layer or data layer. So there is a continuous authentication that is going to happen. Again, different banks are at different maturity level. So this zero trust model is helping us to eliminate any kind of cyber anomaly.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. Like I did not basically fully understand the question. I did not hear it properly, but I want to paraphrase the question. The question was around basically like innovation in data security, like what are fintechs doing and how it is getting evolved, right? I mean, earlier, when you thought about basically data security, like the first thing that came into mind, everybody's mind was basically about the technical controls that we actually implement. And that could potentially include like logical controls like access control that Ratan was just talking about. It could include like anonymization of data or de-identification of data, or it could include basically encryption of the data at rest or in motion or at use, right? So various different aspects. So I could talk about that, right? So, but that's something that we already know. So what we do believe is that a lot of innovation has happened in terms of basically like doing data security by design. So earlier, when you thought about basically like data security with respect to basically fintechs in particular, right? So when we have like the PII data that actually comes and how do we secure that? So it happens basically like right from the point of acquisition when we actually like basically get data inside the organization. So we classify the data, and that classification happens through automated basically like tools that we have in place. So after basically the classification is actually done, so it actually gets the appropriate amount of protection with respect to access control, or it is like how much encryption do we need to put on it, or at what level does the encryption need to happen? Does it need to happen at the application level, or does it happen at the presentation level? Does it happen at the cell level? Does it happen at the DB level? So all of those things are basically like automated with respect to the sensitivity of the data. For example, the financial transaction data, the trace data, or the basically like your PII data, which requires basically the highest level of controls, highest level of security. So that's actually by design. So the moment the data enters our organization, all the logical controls and the technical controls that are actually expected for it to basically remain secure are actually implemented by default. So there is literally no human intervention required with respect to basically making sure that, okay, if the controls actually apply to the data. So that we have taken away. So earlier there could be like a lot of mistakes that could happen if somebody has to take a decision on the data security, but now that actually has been taken away because it all basically is by design. Yes, Satish.
No, while Hilal spoke about technology, well, I think innovation and a lot of controls have been put in place, but most of the breaches, if you see, I think it happened because of in fact, people are the weakest link. In fact, a lot of, most of the breaches, if you see, like people giving back OTP or falling prey into this what we call social engineering attacks. I think that's predominantly which I think people awareness has to also increase. No doubt, technology innovation has really happened, and as Hilal said, oh my God, and I think Ratan spoke about 50 plus tools or solutions, right? In fact, he spoke about zero trust. There are hundreds of tools to solve every problem. That's also one of the other area where a lot of CISOs are now trying to consolidate solutions because there are too many solutions out there also. I think there's a lot of innovation. Innovation has been constantly happening, zero trust or the many others. But I believe a lot of data breaches happens because of the weakest link is human not being aware how they fall prey to the social engineering attacks.
Yeah, Santosh.
Satish sort of took my point away. I'm just adding to that thought about humans being the weakest link, right? The most important element to look at, how can the financial institutions continue those educational awareness campaigns? You can already see the regulator putting in a lot of money towards this and spending and try and create why OTP should not be shared. And also, I mean, as simple as people are also looking at harvesting the CCTV data today, right? There are tools that are built out which will sort of, because you're always under the CCTV, right? In some shape and form. Even those data are getting harvested today and evaluated. What kind of passwords are being put? What are the patterns that you're using on your phone? So it's about it's a dual responsibility. It's not just the regulator and the entities. It's also us as users. We have to be more cautious on using that. That's where the education campaigns will come in handy, I'd say.
Sure. Yeah. We have time for 2 more questions.
We have one question here and the final question from the left side. So, yeah, over to you, sir.
Sure. There? Okay. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. This is Dr. Sanjay Gupta. 12 years ago, I was an NRI who had just come from US after 30 years service in US Department of Defense. We had not faced any kind of cyber crimes or malware crimes or anything over there. Maybe it's my mistake. For 30 years, I had not come because there was so much legality of documentation and paperwork to come back. Having said that, you go to any mall, some young girl will rush up to you and say, "Sir, please take this credit card, that card, this card." And my parents were too old. I had to take care of their health also. One such card I had taken, they had swiped 12 lakhs. It's SBI card only. I've settled half of it and taken the case to the cyber crime police. They don't want to handle small, for them 12 lakhs is nothing. They want to handle 100 crores. I go to any companies, I come from the Vaishya Bank family itself. So we don't go out asking for money, we have money. But you go to any company for interview or anything, they want foreign direct investment, FDIs. They want $100 million, $200 million. Yes, through my service of 30 years, I've met a gross projects I have delivered $2 billion, but that money is not mine. That money is what I had worked for.
So, just a request, can you be specific with your question?
What specific is, 12 years ago, we didn't have this kind of platform where we can go and tell what happened. Now, any company, after this economical meltdown we have after COVID, They want foreign investments. I cannot reach out to my partners whom I had worked for 30 years to send money to India. This is so shameful that I faced in my own country. There are many other things, crimes that happens in America, but those don't get reported. I'm a serviceman. What I faced in my country after retirement is what I'm telling. And as of today, I have not had any kind of help or recourse other than my neighbors. Sometimes they feel empathetic. They come and take me out to presentations like this. And thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, you just want to share.
Hi,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
I heard Hilal mention that we are using encryption in use. I want to understand a little bit more about how the banks and the fintechs are actually using encryption in use. Encryption in motion, encryption at rest is pretty common, but encryption in use is very, very new. And what are we doing towards it?
Yeah,
Thanks.
so, yeah, thank you for asking that, because most of the time it's actually a little bit misunderstood. How do we basically like do encryption while the data is in use, right? So it seems like very weird, right? So the idea of basically like encrypting data while it's in use is basically like giving people access to the data that they should only have access to. Say, for example, like in our company, we have engineering department that needs access to the encrypted data to basically like do some kind of investigation, right? So they will need access to a particular set of data, and we will only decrypt that amount of data. We will not encrypt the entire system. Similarly, so there will be a customer success department or customer service department that does not need access to the PII data, or that does not need access to any other data apart from basically the username or user ID of that particular case. So what happens is that we only decrypt, or we only basically like expose or demask or unmask the data that's actually sufficient for him to basically use. So if, for example, in my database, I have like X number of fields or X number of basically columns, I do not decrypt all of them at the same time when somebody is actually using it. So I will only actually like unmask or decrypt only the column that's actually supposed to be working with. So that's when it actually is encryption while it is in use. So at the same time, there's also basically systematic access to the data. We have in-memory basically like processing of encrypted data. And that we have already done. So basically meaning that like if, for example, a service needs access to another service, not just the people, so it's actually being used at that time when it's in memory, but that only happens in memory processing. There is no data that's getting exposed on the disk level or even on the interface, but it gets processed within the memory. It actually like starts and ends when it's actually in memory. So the data does not get unencrypted or decrypted at all. So all the operations happen within the memory itself, so nobody has access to that. So that's actually some of the examples of basically the encryption use. But I will be more than happy to basically like discuss more about it. So that would be fine. Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
No, I think we should discuss offline. See, we can't solve.
Okay. Yeah. So there's one question that we have from here. That's the last question. Yeah.
I'm Professor Murli from Bangalore University Department of Computer Science. My question to Ratan and Hilal. We have seen that we have learned that there are many tools which are being used to actually help any kind of a cyber threat. But the whole information world is driven by language English. Where more than 80% of the information is in language English. And most of the apps are also driven by language English. And apart from that, we also know that we do understand that more than 80% of the people do not understand language English. I mean, they can't speak and write English. But the entire, whatever the applications which any of the banking institutes are providing, or any of these apps which are providing, are driven by language English. So there is a lot of digital divide. Now, what initiatives are you taking to actually bridge this digital divide so that the rural folk, especially the smaller bank people, how do you actually bring these people to the mainstream? Because already we know that the AI is actually killing the whole market or it is giving giving opportunity to people. But how are you taking care of those people who are digitally divided by the mainstream? How do you bring them to the mainstream?
So as I said in the beginning that Ujjivan serves primarily the unserved and underserved, and they are the people, many of them do not understand English. So while we have our internet banking and mobile banking application that caters to the need of the masses and the new generation people, there is a unique initiative that Ujjivan has done, and that is called Hello Ujjivan. And that app is in more than 20 Indian languages. So it reaches the nook and corner of India. Not only these are in the languages, but there are assistants. So any kind of illiterate person also can handle by the means of the voice bot that is built. So that is a very unique product in multiple languages, and we are still evolving that product. Entire gamut of banking operation can be done through that app. That app is called Hello Ujjivan. I urge you to go to our site and look into that, and probably that will be the answer of your question.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? So I was talking about earlier innovation. Innovation does not happen just basically like for the linguistic purpose, right? So recently, like the accessibility options basically in the application is actually very, very important. So I mean, it's not just about basically the language preferences. I wish that was it, right? So there are people who are going to be having certain disabilities also. So we just want to make sure that everybody is able to access the services that they need. So what we did was basically in Razorpay, right? So we earlier launched this, I think late last year, we launched basically a product that was for basically the people who are basically like blind, right? So we actually like had basically a POS system, which is like the machines that you see, the cards where you swipe and things like that. So we actually had to read it aloud, basically the ODPs, and because they cannot read the ODP from the phone, so they cannot actually complete a transaction.
Yeah.
So to make sure that they are able to basically use the services, what we did was we actually developed that auditory service. So they can actually read it aloud. So meaning that innovation, accessibility, language preferences, regional settings, and things like that, they're always taken as a feature. So we always keep on innovating that as well. So yeah, so that's basically how we address those concerns about basically people not being able to use the services.
Sure. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the end of this segment. Thank you everyone thank you all the panel of speakers for coming in and sharing your thoughts. This really helps everyone and in the industry folks as well to stay up to date with the security aspects of how we deal with these kind of threats. And I thank every one of you to have been present here for this session. And yeah, thank you very much.